right, we're good to go.
Okay. Hey, welcome back to the morning session. This is episode 3. Oh wow, I've been a year too long. I started doing 3 with my fingers
You
like this rather
already,
than rather than
that's how they
3
know.
like this. Today we have Coach Rosenbaum from Mckendree University, who also has roots to the international scene. My name is Caleb Leach. It's Evan Harrington. Welcome to the morning session. So, guys, discussion of the show is culture. Is the culture in Europe around American football completely different than that in the U.S.? Evan, I'll let you start. What's your quick take on it?
My quick take on it, yes, the culture is different. There's so many different avenues you can start to get into it from, but I would say the basic thing is why I feel like the culture is different is because younger kids aren't exposed to it at a younger age. That's my big take of it. So they really don't find that profound love for the game and learn the fundamentals of the game until they get older. So that's my take on the culture difference.
Coach Rosenbaum, dive right in. First, give everybody a little background before we go too fast there. I know you're originally from the UK, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So grew up outside London, played football since the age of 14, which is comparable to people in the States. Learned to play under people like Tony Allen and the former NFL Europe coaches, and then took it to university, and from university to Europe in a semi-pro minor league basis, countries like Finland, Germany, further afield in Australia, a stint in the US in the old Arena League. So in terms of my interpretation of a quick view on it is, in the past, probably when I grew up, it was the niche sport, the something to do if you can get into the other sports. But now, given the Wembley situation, it's becoming more mainstream. So,
No, I'd have to agree. To drop my 2 cents in there too, I think the game of American football in Europe it's still growing in certain countries, but it's not just like this cute sport, like, oh, it's a new introduction. And we're trying to grow the game. I think it's competitive. I think there are great athletes here. You see people in the NFL, Jacob Johnson, Chase Claypool's not from Europe, but he's from Canada. He's another international guy. And the list goes on. There's more. Sandro Platzgummer from the IPP program is with the New York Giants. There's so many. David Bada, Washington. So I think, yes, the culture is different, but I think there are some similarities. First being that, yeah, the passion is the passion, right? People love football. Can't knock that. But what would be one of the first differences you had to point out, other than just saying they start at a different age? What's another one?
Oh, I'll go. I would say for me, when I first went to Switzerland in 2014, I would see some lights and I'll get excited, like, oh man, that's a football field? Oh no, it's a soccer, it's a football plots, or it's a soccer stadium, and that just threw me off. And then I go to Frankfurt and I see this huge indoor stadium, and I'm like, man, that's only for soccer, and we're kind of blind to it. You don't realize how big soccer is and how small football is. But now, like Coach is saying, it's growing tremendously. With the international program that NFL has, the NFL Academy up there, and these different countries that are starting their own academy up in Sweden, the Swedish Hall Unicorns, the Vienna Vikings. I think it's just amazing the way it's growing. But I still would say, when you don't have that structure where you're practicing 5 times a week with your hometown club or your high school football team, you kind of miss out on the strenuous things that it takes to be an elite football player. And I'm sure, Coach, I would like for you to chime in on it. What was your thoughts when you came from the UK and came over to America for the first time? And you're seeing all these football fields and you're seeing these kids starting out at 4 or 5 years old. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, the biggest thing in my mind was the volume and the numbers. In the UK, in some of the countries in Europe, we'd be getting perhaps 2-3 practices a week. That might even be on a park or a shared facility. Whereas like at UMass, we got an indoor facility. We've got all the pop-ups you want to use in the world, all the hitting sleds you want to use. Whereas you might be lucky to get 1 or 2 pieces of equipment like that, especially in the UK. So it almost felt like I was a kid in a candy store, because there's so many things that I could play with in terms of coaching the players up and using all this different equipment. But it was the amount of time you could dedicate. You know, the players were coming in every day for strength and conditioning, every day for meetings, before and after practice. Practice would be, 1.5 to 2.5 hours long. And I just thought I would have loved that as a kid. I would have loved that as a young person in Germany, to be able to have that volume of training. That's what really struck home to me.
Well, 100%. I think there were a few people that wrote in, like a common comment we got on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook around this topic was the high school system, and the fact that you can have a regimented training schedule all the time in the US. And in Europe, it's a club sport. So I won't get 4 trainings. I might get 2. And as you said, on a park field, or like anywhere we can find the train, it's not a full football field with the lines. And anyone who's at a football practice without actual lines on it, you know how hard it is. Like, how you gonna tell your receiver to run a 5 and out or speed out at 5 yards, and he's thinking he went 5 yards, he went 22. You know what I mean? All these things. But what about the competition? What about the competition that do you think it's lopsided, in the middle of the road? Somebody stop me. If this is the US, this is Europe.
Go ahead, Coach.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say it just depends on where you are in Europe. I would say the younger the guys are able to start, the more experienced they are, even if they're just starting out with flag football. Like I know a lot of the kids are starting to do in Europe, and that's really picking up. And I think that is so awesome of a way to introduce the game is flag football. But you come over here, guys are in America, they're full padded at 4 years old, so they have the upper hand. So I would say that competition level is much higher and much advanced than people actually think.
So, like, from my experience in Europe, it's like Coach said, depending on what country you're in. In Germany and Austria, they've got that almost whole program approach to developing the player. So you might get the kid in at, say, 10 or 12, and they will then grow into the senior league players when they're 18, 19, 20.
Right.
And that's almost a quite a unique advantage compared to the US system, because we'll get guys who have done high school, perhaps they went JUCO, perhaps they transferred from another college, and they've had to learn so many different systems, so much different terminology, that almost sometimes you wonder if the players' heads are going to explode, because they've learned 4 or 5 words for the same technique, whereas in Europe, like yourself, you've seen guys and they're using the one system, they're really getting into that. Now, is there an advantage, disadvantage? Well, there's an advantage in the sense that you can install the whole scheme, but there starts to become a disadvantage, especially if the guys come to the States, where they've then been introduced to a completely new system. If that's foreign to them, that red shirt year or that freshman year, they're not just going to be learning how to lift, they're going to be learning how to learn football again, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. So then that leads into my next question that I'm sure someone's already thinking about it. The athlete that aspires to go to high school or college in the US from Europe, we've just mentioned the competition levels are different. The terminology and the IQ, therefore, it's different because he gets to learn different things. It does not mean that the players in Europe are behind, like, in any way. Just someone got to learn something before you, right? So with that being said, is it possible for the athlete to come directly from Europe and still be on the same competitive level to go to college? Excuse me.
Like, for what I've seen, probably in the last year or two, there is a more of an openness from the college, especially at Division 1, where they are looking for any diamond in the rough. They're turning over all the stones they can. And when you've got, half your staff trying to recruit the same 3 states or 4 states, they've got to look elsewhere. And I think that's something programs like UMass and the group of 5 colleges are realizing. We can't compete for the same crop of of talent in the same states, so they're looking further afield. Canada being one of the places, obviously Germany, Austria, and the quality of athlete, the top quality of athlete coming out of some of these countries now is absolutely comparable and will allow them to get into Division One. Absolutely, I believe that. And one of the players who I saw last year, almost 16 months ago, was Olis Alanen, the Finnish offensive lineman. I think he's absolutely going to set it on fire, where people set up and realize they need to dedicate staff to recruit Europe. I think he's going to be the one to make it.
Oh, Olis is a beast. He's 16, turning 17 years old in Finland. He just picked up his last offer, I think, from the University of Michigan. And he now has about 18 total offers. Marlon Klein from Germany just committed to the University of Michigan. He had about 20 offers. He's playing at Rainbow Gap High School. So I'm agreeing. There's a number of athletes, country to country, that can make it. It is possible. There was another receiver from Italy who was walking on to the University of Michigan this year. Unfortunately, he had to come back home, coronavirus, all the other jazz. But then, Evan, what would you say to the guy who has played in Europe, developed through high school? He's thinking IPP or Global Pathway program for the pros. Should he have taken a year to get to the States before, or can he get it directly from Europe?
I would say it's definitely tough to go straight from Europe and have ultimate success at the NFL level, but it also depends on what club you're at in Europe. If you're at a club like the Swarco Raiders, where they're known to have great coaches, or you're at a club like the Vienna Vikings, or you're at a club like Swedish Hall Unicorns, or you might go to the NFL Academy as they're developing their program, where you're getting quality coaching from coaches who have been over there and seen talent, and seeing what it takes to get to that next level. Because I think what you're having now is a lot of guys saying they're coaches and everything, but if your coach is not telling you what you're doing wrong and what are your flaws, you cannot be successful. And I think that's one of those culture things that is very different from Europe and America, where in Europe, because there are not that many players, you kind of praise your best player where he doesn't really know his flaws. Where in America, there's such a surplus of players, the coaches are not afraid to tell you, hey, you better get better, or this guy behind you is going to take your spot. And I think that's one of those culture things where we're talking about what is the difference between American and European football.
100%. And I think you touched on something there too, is the struggle of being seen, right? Depending on what club you're at. And Coach Rosenbaum, we spoke about it via Twitter 10 days ago. It's that trust factor that the international community has between one another. The coaches in the U.S. seeing a player in Europe or any other country, South America, Australia, Japan, all these other places. And it's like, well, how can I trust the level of football? Can I trust his learning process? Has he been groomed up? And it comes back to like, oh, well, should these guys compete against each other? How do you make it happen? Is an all-star game good enough? Is a simple showcase camp good enough? Do I need to see this guy in person? Nobody really knows, right? I know myself, I'm kind of like, all right, well, if I can touch it, I can see it, I trust it a little more than just the digital thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think one thing that I wanted to bring up, there's a young man by the name of Nash. He brought up the motive. What is the ultimate motive from the player? Are you playing for respect? Are you playing for fun? Are you playing to make a living? Are you playing to, what else did they say? Are you just playing to enjoy your free time? All these points, and these are different motives in different places. I don't know if you guys experienced that when you're talking to these different athletes.
So what I've seen from international athletes is kind of more of the motive of competing and competing at a higher level, and the motivation of challenging yourself in that environment. And with the US, you get that as well from the college athletes, but also there is an element where they are trying to get their education. It's expensive to learn. But what I think the international athlete needs to realize is there's a slightly more business element to the sport here in the US. So when they're coming over, that they need to have that professional mindset, even at college. They might not be getting paid, and we don't know what the name, image, likeness is going to happen in the future, but there's a lot of money being invested in them. There's a lot of money in the program that they're joining. So every international athlete I speak to, it's you're coming over here, you're going to be the professional and be the guy that everyone else is watching to copy, become that guy and that leader.
100%.
Coach, I think you hit it right on the head, man. It's a business at this level. I mean, I think a lot of the kids don't realize scholarships are year to year, meaning that coach has that option to say, okay, hey, we don't have a scholarship for you this year, or you didn't perform well this year, and he can pull your scholarship. And like Coach said, it's truly a business because unlike in Europe, college here, it's available, but it's not affordable. College in Europe, it's available and it's affordable. So, you've got guys over here not only playing football, but in sports in general in the United States who are actually playing to better their lives, to try to be their first generation college graduate, or, just to get education or to be a professional athlete because that's the way they see themselves making money versus in Europe. And I despise when people would say this, it's a hobby. Football is a hobby. When someone told me it's a hobby, I'm like, man, this is how I created my lifestyle. This is how I plan to feed my family for the rest of my life is through football. And for you to tell me that's a hobby, that's a slap in the face, to some guys, So I think that's another one of those culture things. And Coach, I'm so glad you said that. It's truly a business here with all the money that's invested, not only you, but the coaches earn and the amount of money you can make playing professional football and just having a degree here.
100%. 100%. I think you guys nailed that question. I can't dig too deep into that one. So we've hit our 15-minute mark, but I think there's a little more to unpack. So to wrap up, well, before we wrap up, first, any of the young guys who are watching with aspirations, maybe going to high school, before the university, going to the U.S. and doing like a year abroad, hey man, that's a real option. If you have an opportunity and you can afford it, try it. It's not a bad thing, but that's not to say you can't get developed by your home club if you are already in a well-stable club, have solid, consistent, and committed coaches as Coach Harrington and Coach Rosenbaum here on this show. But to wrap up, is there a big difference in the culture in the sport? Yes or no? And then give us some final words. Coach Rosenbaum, we'll start with you.
Yes, there is, but it's decreasing. So I think ground has been made by the Europeans. All I'd say is start to see it as a profession, both in the US and in Europe. And like you said, seek out the expertise, seek out the people like yourselves who can promote you and have your best interests and know what the American coaches are looking for if you aspire to go to college.
100%. Thank you, Coach. Evan?
I would say, yes, there is a difference. And I believe that all starts, like Coach said, with taking it as a business versus a hobby. If you truly want to play at the next level, find a coach who's played at a high level, at the highest level. I mean, I know people say, coaches aren't out there, but there's so many quality coaches out there. And yes, playing experience and coaching experience does matter. You look at Coach Rosenbaum, I'm pretty sure, Coach, he was committed to be a coach in America. And for him to take that step from Europe, I can bet you every night he was studying and making connections. And there are more guys like him in Europe and internationally who are willing to invest their time into a kid because when you're investing their time, they're teaching you, they're learning themselves, and they're also progressing themselves because as they're helping you, they're also helping themselves. So find you a mentor or coach who aspires not to just be a club coach, but to be a club coach who's investing in you and investing in your future.
All right, guys. So thank you for that. Thank you for the wisdom from both of you coaches. My final piece, yes, there's a difference in the culture between the two. The sport is the sport. So with that being said, hey, man, you can push yourself in the sport. And even though your culture might be different in your country, your hometown, your community, than that of the competition's culture does not mean you can't rise up and meet the competition or surpass it. So thanks, guys, for joining the show. Hope everybody enjoyed watching this. Till next time.
Peace.